What if the most life-changing moment of your life didn't happen at a grand wedding, but inside a quiet government office with nothing more than a pen and a promise? This is the story of Huyen and Day, two hearts who chose love not just in words, but in action. From a tender morning filled with nervous excitement, to the emotional signing of their marriage certificate, and finally to a peaceful afternoon dreaming about their shared future. Their journey proves that true commitment is built in simple, sincere moments. This is how their forever began, quietly, deeply, and beautifully. That morning felt different from any other morning Gwen had ever known. The sunlight streamed gently through her window, soft and golden, as if the day itself understood the importance of what was about to happen. She stood quietly in front of the mirror, holding a simple white dress against her body. It was not extravagant, not the kind of dress people wore for grand weddings with hundreds of guests, but to her it was perfect. It symbolized purity, sincerity, and the quiet strength of a love that had grown steadily over time. As she carefully brushed her hair and applied a touch of light makeup, her hands trembled slightly, not from doubt, but from overwhelming emotion. Today, she and Det would go to register their marriage. Today, they would no longer be just lovers. They would become husband and wife in the eyes of the law and the world. Outside, Det waited patiently by the gate, dressed in a neatly pressed light blue shirt and dark trousers. He had arrived earlier than planned, unable to sit still at home. His heart had been racing since dawn. He kept replaying the journey that had led them here, the first shy conversations, the long evenings walking side by side, the misunderstandings they had worked through, and the countless small sacrifices they had made for each other. Loving Huyen had never felt like a burden. It had always felt like coming home. When the door finally opened and Huyen stepped out, time seemed to pause. She looked radiant, not because of the dress or the sunlight, but because of the quiet determination in her eyes. She was choosing him, fully and wholeheartedly. For a brief second, they simply stood there, gazing at one another. No grand speech was necessary. Dell walked toward her slowly, as if approaching something precious and sacred. "Are you ready?" he asked softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Gwen nodded, her lips curving into a gentle smile. "I've been ready for a long time," she replied. As they began walking side by side toward the car, their fingers intertwined naturally, as they had done countless times before. Yet today, the gesture carried a deeper meaning. It was no longer just about affection, it was about commitment. Des squeezed her hand lightly and said, almost in a whisper, "Today I want you to be my wife, not only in my heart, but in every way that matters." Gwen felt her eyes sting with tears, but they were tears of joy. She had always known that love was more than passionate words or dramatic promises. It was about showing up, choosing each other again and again, even on ordinary days. As they drove toward the marriage registration office, the city moved around them in its usual rhythm, unaware that inside that car, two hearts were stepping into a new chapter of life. Gwen looked out the window, then back at Dad, realizing that this was not just a legal formality, it was the quiet, powerful beginning of forever. When they arrived at the marriage registration office, the building itself looked modest and unremarkable. Yet to Huyen and Day, it felt almost sacred. The ordinary cream-colored walls, the wooden desks, the faint sound of papers being shuffled, everything seemed to fade into the background as they stepped inside together. This was not a grand cathedral, nor a lavish wedding hall adorned with flowers and music, but it was the place where their love would be recognized, recorded, and sealed in the simplest and most powerful way. Huyen felt her heartbeat quicken as they approached the reception desk. Day sensed her nervousness and gently brushed his thumb across her knuckles, a silent reassurance that he was right there with her. They were guided to a small desk where a kind official handed them the necessary documents. The papers looked so ordinary, black ink printed neatly across white pages, yet the weight of them felt extraordinary. Huyen read every line carefully, her eyes lingering over their names written side by side. Seeing Huyen and Day aligned in the same space stirred something deep within her chest. It was no longer just a dream of a shared future. It was becoming tangible, real, undeniable. Day glanced at her and smiled softly, his gaze filled with warmth and quiet pride. He had imagined this moment many times, but standing here now felt far more profound than he had ever expected. When the official asked them to confirm their decision, there was a brief, almost ceremonial pause. "Do you both enter this marriage willingly?" the voice asked gently. Day answered first, his voice clear and unwavering. "Yes, I do." There was no hesitation, no trace of doubt, only certainty born from years of loving her through every season. Huyen felt tears gather in her eyes as she followed with her own answer. "Yes, I do." The words were simple, yet they carried the depth of countless memories, shared struggles, whispered dreams, and promises made in quiet moments. Then came the moment to sign. Day picked up the pen, his fingers steady despite the emotions surging within him. As he wrote his name, each stroke felt deliberate, like carving a vow into permanence. When he finished, he passed the pen to Huyen. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself, and signed her name beside his. Their signatures lay next to each other, inseparable, marking the official beginning of their life as husband and wife. It was astonishing how something so small, a signature, could hold so much meaning. The officials stamped the document and handed them their marriage certificate, offering warm congratulations. Day turned to Huyen, his eyes shining. "From today on, you are my wife," he said softly, his voice trembling just slightly with emotion. Huyen let out a tearful laugh, overwhelmed by the simplicity and beauty of the moment. There were no cameras flashing, no audience applauding, just the two of them, standing side by side, wrapped in a quiet joy that felt deeper than any celebration. In that modest room, surrounded by paperwork and plain walls, they had just promised forever. Clutching the marriage certificate carefully between them, Uyen and Duc stepped out of the office into the open air, and somehow the world felt subtly transformed. The sky above seemed impossibly blue, the sunlight warmer, as if nature itself had paused to bless their union. Cars passed by, people hurried along the sidewalks. Life continued in its usual rhythm, yet for them, everything had shifted. They were no longer simply two people in love. They were husband and wife. The words echoed softly in Uyen's mind, carrying both comfort and responsibility. Duck glanced at her as they descended the steps, noticing the quiet smile playing on her lips. Without a word, he reached for her hand again, their fingers intertwining with a familiarity that now carried a deeper permanence. They decided not to rush home. Instead, they walked slowly down the street, savoring the weight and sweetness of the moment. There was something beautiful about the ordinariness of the day, the small shops lining the road, the scent of coffee drifting from a nearby cafe, the distant laughter of children. It reminded them that marriage was not just about grand milestones, but about sharing these everyday scenes together. Doug suggested they stop at a small cafe they both loved, a cozy place with wooden tables and soft music playing in the background. It felt fitting to mark the beginning of their new chapter in a space that had witnessed so many of their conversations and dreams. Seated across from each other with two warm cups of coffee between them, they allowed the reality to settle in. Duck leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful but full of light. "We did it," he said softly, almost in disbelief. Huyen nodded, tracing the rim of her cup with her fingers. "We did," she replied, her voice steady yet tender. There was no need for dramatic declarations. The depth of their love was evident in the calmness between them, in the comfortable silence that felt richer than words. Doug began to speak about the future, not in grand, unrealistic promises, but in heartfelt hopes. He talked about building a home filled with warmth and laughter, about cooking dinner together after long days, about supporting each other's ambitions, and about one day hearing the tiny footsteps of children running through the house. As he spoke, Uyen listened intently, her heart swelling with quiet joy. She realized that this was what she had always wanted, not extravagance or spectacle, but partnership, a life built side by side, step by step. Uyen reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "No matter what comes, we face it together," she said gently. Doug squeezed her hand in return, his eyes shining with gratitude and love. In that simple cafe, surrounded by the hum of everyday life, they made another unspoken vow, not just to love each other in easy times, but to stand firm in challenges, to choose patience over pride, understanding over anger. As they left the cafe and walked toward their shared future, the marriage certificate safely tucked away, their steps felt lighter, yet more grounded. The journey ahead would not always be perfect, but it would be theirs, woven with trust, resilience, and unwavering devotion. And in the quiet certainty of that afternoon, Uyen and Duck began the most meaningful chapter of all, a lifetime of choosing each other every single day.